Hey everyone, welcome back. Today we're diving deep into a book that's all about making big changes through small steps.
Sounds intriguing.
It is. It's called One Small Step Can Change Your Life, The Kaizen Way by Robert Maurer. It's all about this technique called Kaizen, and I'm really excited to unpack it with you today.
I'm familiar with Kaizen, but to be honest, I always thought of it as this, kind of mystical Eastern philosophy.
Yeah, me too. But the book actually reveals that it has roots in American ingenuity, which I found surprising.
Really? That is surprising. How so?
Well, it all started during World War II. America needed to boost production, but was short on skilled workers. So they came up with this idea of continuous improvement, making small tweaks and adjustments to increase efficiency.
Ah, I see. Like wartime necessity breeding innovation.
Exactly. And it actually played a big role in the Allied victory. Then, after the war, as Japan was rebuilding, General MacArthur saw the potential of this approach.
Interesting. So did the Americans share this idea with the Japanese?
They did. They brought in experts, and the Japanese, they really embraced it. In fact, they took it to a whole new level and gave it the name we know today, Kaizen, which essentially means continuous improvement.
Fascinating. So the book takes this concept from the industrial world and applies it to personal transformation.
Yes, and Maurer makes it super practical. He starts with the story of Julie, a single mom who's super stressed and trying to build a regular exercise habit.
I can relate to that.
Right. It's like Mission Impossible sometimes. But instead of telling Julie to hit the gym for an hour, which can be totally overwhelming, he suggests something ridiculously small, marching in place for just 1 minute each day.
1 minute. That's it.
I know, right? Sounds almost too easy. But the point is to bypass that fear response we often have to big changes.
That makes sense. Like our brains don't see it as a threat, so we're more likely to actually do it.
Exactly. And for Julie, that 1 minute created a tiny win, a spark of, hey, I can do this. And that little spark ignited a chain reaction.
So she started feeling better and more motivated and naturally started adding more movement to her day.
Precisely. It's like a snowball effect, but for good habits.
I love that analogy. But is there any scientific basis for this small steps approach, or is it just a motivational trick?
Oh, there's definitely science behind it. Every time you take a small step towards a goal, your brain releases dopamine, that feel-good chemical.
Ah, so that dopamine reinforces the behavior, making you more likely to repeat it.
Exactly. And over time, those tiny steps rewire your brain, creating new neural pathways and habits. It's like paving a new road in your brain, one tiny pebble at a time.
That's a great way to put it. So the book provides specific strategies for implementing Kaizen in our lives.
It does, and that's what we're going to explore next. I'm really excited to dive into those strategies because they're super practical and can be applied to pretty much any area of life.
Okay, I'm ready. Let's hear them. All right, so the first Kaizen strategy is called Ask Small Questions. And it's all about, asking questions.
Okay, but how can simply asking a question be a strategy for change? It sounds a little counterintuitive.
It is, but it's about the kinds of questions we ask ourselves. See, when we're facing a problem, we tend to ask these big, overwhelming questions, right?
Yeah, all the time. Like, how am I ever going to get this all done? Or what if I fail? Those kinds of things.
And those big questions, what do? They just trigger our fear response, making us feel more stuck.
Yeah, totally. They make me want to just give up before I even start.
Exactly. But smaller questions, they kind of sneak in under the radar. They don't trigger that fear response.
So instead of how can I finish this whole project, it's more like, what's one tiny thing I can do right now to move forward?
You got it. Or maybe even, what's one thing I'm actually looking forward to about this project?
Yeah. Those questions feel way less intimidating. And they actually make me want to start thinking about solutions.
That's the power of small questions. They open up your mind to possibilities instead of shutting it down.
Okay, I'm starting to see how this works. It's like those small questions kind of trick your brain into problem-solving mode without triggering that panic button.
Exactly. And Maurer has this great example in the book. He talks about this woman named Grace who was struggling with intimacy in her relationships.
Oh, yeah, I remember Grace. She seemed so afraid of getting hurt that she was pushing people away.
Exactly. And instead of asking her these big, probing questions about her past or her fears, which would have probably just made her shut down even more.
Yeah, it's like those big questions, they're almost accusatory, like, what's wrong with you?
Right. So instead, Maurer started with small, gentle questions. Like, what's one thing you appreciate about this person? Or what's a small step you could take today to feel a little bit safer in this relationship?
Okay, that makes sense. It's like Those smaller questions allow her to approach those big issues without feeling overwhelmed.
Exactly. It's about gently nudging yourself forward instead of forcing it.
I love that. Okay, so ask small questions is strategy number one. What's next on the list?
All right, this one might sound a bit woo-woo, but stick with me. It's called Think Small Thoughts, or mind sculpture.
Mind sculpture. Okay, that definitely sounds a little out there.
But it's actually based on some pretty solid neuroscience. It's all about harnessing the power of visualization to create change.
So it's like we're not just thinking about our goals, we're actually experiencing them in our minds.
Exactly. And not just experiencing them, but really sculpting the details, engaging all your senses to make it feel as real as possible.
Okay, I think I get the mind sculpture part now. But how does this actually work?
Well, Maurer gives this fascinating example of an Olympic javelin thrower, Steve Backley, who used this technique to stay in top form while he was recovering from an injury.
Seriously? So he couldn't physically train, but he was training in his mind.
Yeah. He'd basically lie there and visualize himself going through the entire throwing routine. He'd feel the weight of the javelin, the tension in his muscles, even hear the roar of the crowd.
And that actually worked. Like, when he recovered, he was still in good shape.
It did. It's pretty amazing, right? And it shows how powerful our minds can be in shaping our reality.
Totally. But I'm not an Olympic athlete. How can I use this mind sculpture technique in my own life?
You can apply it to almost anything. Let's say you're trying to create healthier eating habits.
Okay, that's relevant. I could definitely use some help there.
So you could spend a few minutes each day visualizing yourself at a meal. You see the healthy food on your plate, you smell the aromas, you feel the textures as you take each bite.
Okay, I'm starting to get the picture. You're basically creating this mental movie of yourself making healthy choices.
Yes. And you can even imagine yourself feeling satisfied after eating a reasonable portion, instead of feeling that urge to overeat.
So you're basically rewiring your brain to associate pleasure with those healthier choices.
Exactly. And the more you rehearse this mental movie, the easier it becomes to make those choices in real life. Your brain starts to recognize that feeling of satisfaction with less food.
It's like you're training your brain to crave those healthier options.
Precisely. And that's the power of mind sculpture. It's about creating those new neural pathways, those new habits, before you even take any physical action.
Okay, so we've got ask small questions and think small thoughts. Both super interesting. What's the next Kaizen strategy?
All right, now this one is where the rubber meets the road. It's called take small actions.
Wait, but haven't we been talking about taking small steps this whole time? What's different about this strategy?
It's about emphasizing how those small thoughts and intentions we've been talking about actually translate into concrete actions. But those actions, they need to be so small, almost ridiculously small, that they don't trigger any resistance.
Okay, give me an example. I'm having trouble picturing what a ridiculously small action would look like.
Sure. Maurer worked with this medical clinic that was trying to improve patient satisfaction. And one of the biggest complaints was the long wait times.
Oh yeah, long wait times are the worst.
Right. And they were thinking about all these big, expensive solutions like hiring more staff or expanding the facility. But Maurer suggested they focus on tiny actions that could make a difference right away.
What kind of tiny actions?
Simple things, like having the receptionist apologize for the delay, give patients a realistic wait time, offer them the option to reschedule.
Okay, so it's about acknowledging the problem and showing empathy. But would those small gestures really make a difference?
They did. It's amazing how those little acts of kindness and communication can go such a long way. Patient satisfaction actually doubled.
Wow, that's impressive. So it's not about making these sweeping changes. It's about finding those tiny touch points where you can improve the experience.
Exactly. And this applies to personal goals too. Remember Julie, the single mom? Well, she started with just 1 minute of marching in place each day.
Right, and eventually she worked her way up to a full-fledged exercise routine.
Exactly, because that 1 minute, it was so easy. It didn't trigger any resistance. It was just a tiny step. But it created that momentum, that feeling of, I can do this.
Okay, I'm getting this. It's not about forcing ourselves to change overnight. It's about finding those tiny actions that we can do consistently, day after day.
You got it. And consistency is key here. Maurer actually tells this amazing story about a woman who wanted to cut back on sugar in her tea.
Okay, I'm intrigued. What does she do?
She decided to remove just 1 grain of sugar from her tea each day. Just 1 grain.
Wow, that's commitment. But it would take forever to make a noticeable difference, right?
It did. It took her almost a year to completely eliminate the sugar. But the point is, she did it. 1 tiny, almost invisible step at a time.
That's pretty incredible. It shows how even those minuscule actions, when repeated consistently, can add up to big changes. But okay, let's say I'm trying to implement this take small actions strategy in my own life. Are there any specific actions that are kind of universally effective, or is it more about finding what works for you?
It's definitely about finding what works for you and your specific goals, but Moore does offer some helpful examples, like if you're trying to eat healthier,
Always a good goal.
he suggests, maybe try throwing away 3 bites of a snack before you eat it.
Interesting. It's like you're creating a little pause, a moment of awareness before just mindlessly munching.
Exactly. Or if you want to exercise more, maybe just do 5 push-ups or squats every day.
Okay, yeah, 5 push-ups, I can definitely handle that. It's about making it so easy that there's no excuse not to do it.
Exactly. And then once that tiny action becomes a habit, you can gradually increase the intensity or duration.
It's like building those muscles of consistency.
Yeah, you're getting it.
All right, bring on the next Kaizen strategy. I'm ready for more.
Okay, this one might seem a little counterintuitive at first. It's called solve small problems.
Solve small problems. But if we're all about small steps, shouldn't we be creating small problems, not solving them?
Think of it this way. Big problems, they often arise because we've ignored those smaller issues, right?
Okay, yeah, I can see that. It's like letting those little things pile up until they become this giant, overwhelming mess.
Precisely. It's like that tiny leak in your roof that you ignore, and then bam, you've got a major water damage situation.
Oh, yeah, not fun. So this strategy is about being proactive, about addressing those little cracks before they turn into gaping holes.
Exactly. And Maurer uses this great analogy, the broken windows theory of crime prevention.
I've heard of that, but I can't quite remember what it is.
It's this idea that visible signs of disorder, like a broken window in a building or graffiti on a wall, can actually encourage more serious crime.
Oh, right, yeah. It's like it sends the signal that nobody cares, that anything goes.
Exactly. And so the best way to prevent those bigger crimes is to address those smaller signs of disorder right away.
Okay, so in a way, it's like applying Kaizen to our environment, to our communities.
You got it. It's about creating that sense of order and care, which then discourages those bigger problems from taking root.
So it's not just about our personal goals. It's about applying this Kaizen mindset to our surroundings as well.
Exactly. It's about being mindful of those small problems and taking those small actions to address them before they escalate. And that applies to our relationships, our work habits, our health, everything.
Okay, I can see how this fits into the bigger picture of Kaizen. It's like you're creating this foundation of small wins and positive momentum, so you're less likely to get derailed by those bigger challenges.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
So how do you think we could apply this solve small problem strategy to a personal goal, like, let's say, improving our communication skills?
That's a good one. Instead of trying to become a charismatic public speaker overnight, maybe it's more about focusing on becoming a better listener in our everyday conversations.
That's excellent. And what are some small actions you could take to improve your listening skills?
Well, I could make more eye contact when people are talking, ask clarifying questions, really try to understand their perspective instead of just waiting for my turn to talk.
Those are great examples. And those small adjustments, they can have a ripple effect, improving your relationships and making you a more effective communicator overall.
Okay, I'm totally on board with solve small problems. What's the next Kaizen strategy?
All right, this one is all about celebrating those small wins along the way. It's called bestow small rewards.
Rewards. Okay, I like where this is going. But why small rewards? I mean, sometimes we deserve to splurge a little, right?
Of course. But it's important to understand how our brains work. Big rewards, they can actually backfire. They create this pressure to perform, and that can actually kill our intrinsic motivation.
So it's like focusing so much on the end goal that you forget to enjoy the journey.
Exactly. And you become dependent on those external rewards for motivation, which isn't really sustainable in the long run. Small rewards, though, they tap into something much deeper intrinsic motivation.
Okay, so it's not about the size of the reward, but the feeling it creates, the sense of accomplishment and progress.
You got it. It's about acknowledging your effort, celebrating your progress, and reinforcing those positive behaviors.
So give me an example. Let's say I'm trying to build a writing habit. What kind of small reward could I give myself for, say, finishing a writing session?
Well, it could be as simple as enjoying a cup of your favorite tea afterwards, listening to a song that inspires you, or even just taking a few minutes to step away from your desk and savor that feeling of accomplishment.
Okay, yeah, I love that. It's about creating those little rituals that make the process more enjoyable and rewarding.
Exactly. And those small rewards, They release dopamine in your brain, which reinforces the behavior and makes you more likely to stick with it.
It's like giving your brain a little high five.
Like that. And it's interesting how cultural differences play into this. Maurer talks about how Japanese companies tend to give smaller rewards for employee suggestions compared to American companies, which often go for those big cash bonuses.
Oh, that's interesting. So it's like the classic quality over quantity approach.
And surprisingly, those smaller rewards in Japan actually lead to higher participation rates and more ideas being implemented.
Wow, that's pretty counterintuitive, but also really cool. It shows how a simple shift in perspective, focusing on appreciation rather than just monetary value, can make a big difference.
And one of the best examples of this is Toyota's Presidential Award. They give it to the employee with the best suggestion of the year, and the prize is a fountain pen.
Wait, a fountain pen? Seriously, that's it?
Yep. It might seem small, but it's a symbol of recognition and appreciation coming from the highest level of the company, and it's incredibly coveted.
Okay, that makes sense. It's like a badge of honor, a tangible reminder of their contribution. It's not about the monetary value, it's about the message it sends.
Exactly. And that brings us to our final Kaizen strategy. It's called Identify Small Moments.
Identify small moments. Okay, that one sounds a bit mysterious. What exactly are we supposed to be identifying?
It's about cultivating a sense of awareness and curiosity in your everyday life. It's about paying attention to those little details, the things we often overlook, because they might just hold the key to big breakthroughs or discoveries.
So it's like being present in the moment and noticing those little whispers of inspiration that are all around us.
Exactly. And Maurer has all these great stories about how small moments have led to major innovations. Like, remember that American Airlines flight attendant who noticed that most passengers weren't eating the olives in their salads?
Oh, yeah. That simple observation saved the airline a ton of money.
And then there's 3M, the company that makes all those innovative products. Well, their whole waterproof sandpaper line was born out of a simple customer request.
Okay, what was the request?
A customer wrote in asking for samples of the mineral grit that 3M used in its sandpaper.
Wow, that's a pretty specific request.
Right. And most people would have just ignored it, but 3M's president, he was intrigued.
So he decided to follow his curiosity, and it led to a major breakthrough for the company.
Exactly. And there's so many stories like that. The invention of traveler's checks, Velcro, they all stemmed from someone paying attention to a seemingly small detail and asking, what if?
Okay, so it's about having that childlike curiosity, that beginner's mind that sees possibility in everything.
Exactly. And it's not just about innovations or problem solving. It's about noticing those small moments of joy, connection, meaning in our everyday lives.
It's about savoring those little things that make life worth living.
And Maurer shares this great story about a police officer who was unhappy in his job.
Oh, yeah, I remember that story. He just couldn't figure out what he wanted to do with his life.
Right. And Maurer encourages him to pay attention to those small moments when he actually enjoyed his work.
And it turned out that what he really loved was talking to people, offering them advice and support.
And that realization led him to pursue a completely different career path, one that was much more fulfilling.
It's amazing how those small moments of joy and connection can help us uncover our true passions and purpose.
And that's the essence of Kaizen, really. It's not just a set of techniques, but it's a philosophy. It's a way of approaching life with a mindset of continuous improvement and a deep appreciation for those small moments that make life worth living.
So it's not just about achieving those big goals, it's about who we become along the way. It's about embracing those small steps and making them a part of our everyday lives.
And that brings us to the heart of what Maurer is trying to convey, I think. Kaizen is so much more than just a way to achieve goals. It's a way of being.
Okay, so it's not just something you do, it's a way you live.
That's a great question, and it leads us into the final part of the book, where Maurer explores those deeper implications of living a Kaizen-inspired life.
Okay, I'm really intrigued to hear more about those deeper implications. What does it really mean to live a life of Kaizen? All right, I'm really intrigued to hear more about those deeper implications. What does it really mean to live a life of Kaizen?
Well, it encourages us to shift our focus, from just outcomes to the process of growth and change.
Interesting. So it's not about reaching some perfect end state. It's more about embracing the journey.
Yeah, exactly. It's about those small incremental improvements along the way. And, that shift in perspective, it could be really freeing.
It takes the pressure off, right? You don't have to have everything figured out. You just focus on taking those small steps forward.
Exactly. It's about enjoying the process of becoming, the best version of yourself.
And often, I think when you focus on the process, the results, they just kind of take care of themselves, right?
They really do.
Yeah.
And this mindset, it can extend beyond just our personal goals, too.
Oh, yeah, totally. How so?
Well, Kaizen encourages us to approach our relationships, our work, even our communities with that same spirit of continuous improvement.
Okay, I get how that would apply to like personal growth or career goals, but how can we use Kaizen to, I don't know, improve our community? That seems kind of like a big abstract thing.
Well, think back to the solve small problems strategy. Instead of waiting for, the governments or some big organization to fix everything,
Yeah.
we can each take small steps to address those issues that we see in our own neighborhoods.
Okay, so instead of complaining about the park being dirty, I could like organize a cleanup day.
Yeah, exactly. Or maybe you notice that, some elderly folks in your building are feeling kind of isolated.
Right.
Maybe just start by saying hello, checking in on them regularly.
It's those little acts of kindness, those small gestures that can really make a difference.
Exactly. And those small acts, they don't require a ton of time or resources.
No, not at all.
It's just about making those little efforts consistently, weaving them into our daily lives.
It's like each of us has this little spark of Kaizen, And when we share that spark with others, it can ignite a chain reaction of positive change.
I love that. And that brings us to this really powerful question that R.O. poses at the end of his book. He says, perhaps life's most important task is to draw out the possibility in each moment.
Wow, that's beautiful.
Isn't it?
It really is. And I think it ties in perfectly with everything we've been talking about. It's about recognizing that every moment, no matter how small or insignificant it might seem, holds the potential for growth, discovery, connection.
Absolutely. So I'll leave you with this. How can you draw out the possibility in each moment of your life? How can you use the principles of Kaizen to create positive change? Not just for yourself, but for the world around you too.
There is a great question, and I think it's one we can all continue to reflect on. It's been such a fascinating deep dive into the world of Kaizen. I love how practical and applicable it is. Like anyone can start incorporating these small steps into their lives today.
It's empowering, isn't it?
It really is, because it shows that we all have the power to make a difference, no matter how small our actions might seem. So thank you for joining us. And remember, keep taking those small steps, those little Kaizen steps, and see what amazing things you can create.